And then there was Lepa Sana from the Central Coast. She and her husband had their documents forged. Not only did their marriage break down and they've lost their houses, she's been made bankrupt. She doesn't even know that she's been made bankrupt because all the documentation goes to George Dimitriou's office. And when it comes up in court about her failing to turn up, they file more fake documents saying she's in a mental institution and that's why she can't come to court.
When Mark Leishman and his wife Kathy first sought out the help of George Dimitriou, they were suffering with cash flow problems at Mark's business. But by the time their working relationship with Dimitriou finished, and after they discovered he was only pretending to be an accountant, their Newcastle home was repossessed, and they lost, they say, $4 million. Today, Chief Investigative Reporter Kate McClymont on George Dimitriou, a serial conman and high school dropout who conned vulnerable people out of millions of dollars with the help of, allegedly, a bank loans manager and a series of lawyers. Kate, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
Okay, well, we feel it's a special day when you're on. So can you just begin with, I guess, telling us who is George Dimitriou? And I have to ask how you stumbled onto this story, because I'm lucky enough, I get to talk to you in the hallways here at the newsroom. And you've told me in the past about some really unexpected sources and locations where you get tips, like, other parents at the school gate. The rest of us just hear about people's renovations, but you hear about,
Walking the dog is always a good source of stories.
Exactly. So tell me how you stumbled on this one.
Well, funnily enough, two lots of victims contacted me separately, like completely randomly, just said, could you please help us with our stories? And the person we're talking about is a man called George Dimitriou, who's a 55-year-old. He's currently in jail in Emu Plains for a fraud. But the thing that upsets the victims is that he has ripped off and ruined so many people's lives. But he's not in jail for ripping them off. He's in jail for defrauding the ANZ Bank. And, George Dimitriou left school in year 10 and set up a garden artistry business. So sometime around 2010, he thinks being a fraudster is going to be so much more profitable. So he just puts a sign up on the wall and says that he is an accountant. He doesn't even have any financial training. He doesn't go to TAFE. He's got nothing at all. And so what he does, the one thing that's still unclear to me is that he must have done a couple of loans in order to get recommendations, or maybe he did a couple of things, but the victims hadn't yet realised they'd been cheated. They think that it's all going okay until it's not. Which brings us to Kathy and Mark Leishman. Yeah. Now, they're, a lovely couple from Newcastle. Mark's father's business was experiencing some cash flow. It was sort of like providing, sort of like mining software to companies. Anyway, a lawyer in Newcastle suggests that they talk to this guy, George Dimitriou, who's, seems to be pretty good at doing loans. So they come down to Sydney and George says, yes, I can do this, I can do that, I'll fix your car leases, etc. Before they know it, they've got, bailiffs knocking on the door saying, we're about to repossess your house. I just remember Kathy Leishman saying she works as a physio in a private hospital in Newcastle, and just saying the embarrassment of having processed servers come to the hospital. Kathy Leishman, you're served.
Gosh, I can imagine. And she said they were respected members of the community.
Yes. A court, later found that their signatures had been forged on documents. But, and then there was Lepa Sana from the Central Coast. She and her husband had their documents forged. Not only did their marriage break down and they've lost their houses, she's been made bankrupt. She doesn't even know that she's been made bankrupt because all the documentation goes to George Dimitriou's office. And when it comes up in court about her failing to turn up, they file more fake documents saying she's in a mental institution and that's why she can't come to court. So poor Lepa is still fighting the bankruptcy trustee. But when you've been stripped of everything, of all your money, you don't have the resources to fight on.
Yeah.
And I think this is what is so heartbreaking for these people, is that having lost everything, it's really hard to find the funds to try to fight back. And that's where George Dimitriou has got away with it for a while. But it's also interesting what the court thinks about these kind of things, because aiding Dimitriou in some of these things have been solicitors. And on one case, one of the New South Wales court judges said, yes, but solicitors wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And it's that thing, can you imagine the frustration sitting there in court where they're believed, but you're not?
You'd feel so let down.
Oh.
You'd feel so betrayed.
And I think the victims feel that they've been let down by the police. They've been let down by the Law Society because their lawyers were sometimes in cahoots with Dimitriou, the bank, and nothing ever seemed to have been done. And if there's any legal aid lawyers listening out there, gee, some of these people could do with a hand.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, we're going to get to the allegations against how the police and the courts and the Law Society and so forth, might have very well failed these clients of George Dimitriou. But I guess take us into what his modus operandi was. Like, did he have a sort of set game that he played, I guess?
Look, what he did was you would come to him to get a loan. And so in some cases they would, he would falsify your tax return. Like in one case with Sue Arnott from Brisbane, she was earning $20,000 a year.
Gee.
And she had a house.
Yeah.
So her brother was wanting to use her house as equity for a loan. The next thing, her tax return is she's getting $220,000. So the loans are astronomical. They're not supported by houses. They're falsifying valuations on houses. They're falsifying, this is Dimitriou, loan documents, selling houses from under people by forging their signatures. It was all-encompassing and widespread. But he would also set up companies with victims' names and then get company loans. It was quite sophisticated and very complicated, like trying to unravel, some victims' names and companies were used to cheat other victims. And so then Dimitriou would pit them against each other saying, Sam, it was Kate that stole your money, not me. So he sort of kept them apart.
That's wow.
It's
That's
just
horrible.
heartbreaking.
It's horrible. And I think it was Sue Arnott. I think she was the person who I think was on $20,000 a year. And was it her that had multiple companies under her name that I think Dimitriou had sort of put in her name?
Yes,
Is that right?
She finally went to an ANZ bank account and said, look, could you just give me a list of the loans that I have in my name? And she was just saying, not what? What? So she did not know that he had taken out names, sort of personal loans, company loans. But she had some financial backing. She was lucky in some ways. So it was Sue Arnott that pursued George through the courts and made him bankrupt. And also it was her loan that the ANZ was able to prove fraud on Dimitriou's behalf. But again, as I said, it's, the police took action because he defrauded the ANZ, not because he defrauded all these poor other people.
And then there's one detail that really stuck out for me from your story. This is a Melbourne businessman who you've called Mr. M because he's asked not to be named. And he was chasing George Dimitriou for the return of his own money. And astonishingly, he said he went to police and he was put onto a detective from the New South Wales Fraud Squad who, after hearing Mr. M's story, said, "You too?" and said that there were plenty of others. Like, did the police then take action after that? Or was he just left with oh, you also got duped?
Look, I think that, nothing ended up happening with all these allegations. But this was extraordinary. So in 2011, Mr. M, who's been put on to George Dimitriou, somebody else had heard about him. So he goes to, he needs a loan to finance some business arrangements. So he goes along to Dimitriou and he uses 2 houses in Melbourne as security for the loans. Now, the loans are meant to go into a family company account. And it was something like, I think 2.3 million. So, the loan's been approved. So he keeps checking in the company account. Not there, not there. He finally goes into his own local ANZ bank and they go, "Oh, yeah. It went in and it went out." And he said, "It went out?" And he said, "Yes, it's gone into these accounts." And they were associated with Dimitriou. But when he rings up Dimitriou says, "Oh, yes, remember, you gave me permission to invest the money on your behalf." And he said, "I did not. This money is for a family loan." He said, No, you gave permission." He said, "Okay, where's my signature? There was nothing." And he eventually, and the other thing was that his family, they're all fighting, saying, "You've taken the money." He said, "I didn't. I promise you, the money went in and the money went out." And he went to the New South Wales police and that's when they were told, "Oh, so you too have been defrauded by this man."
And did he ever get his money back?
No.
So I do have to ask, though, did the ANZ fail the victims of George Dimitriou?
Look, I think that they did because I think that they possibly just thought it wouldn't be possible. But now, I sort of wonder if they ever went back after the court case. And don't forget, the court case was, Dimitriou ripping off the ANZ bank. After their former Chatswood, loans manager admitted in court saying, "Yes, I faked the signature," did they go back and check what other claims had come before them previously? Did they reassess, what had happened to their customers in the past? I don't know. They wouldn't say.
So you've asked them and just got silence?
Yes.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned Lepasana. She was left bankrupt after Dimitriou manufactured loan documents and forged her and her husband's signatures on numerous documents, including on the sale of their house at Copacabana. She's the one who told you that her marriage broke down from, the stress and the horribleness of all of this. Now, she told you that her efforts to, quote, "bring attention to the frauds perpetrated by Dimitriou have been dismissed at every turn." So who did she turn to? And are there any other authorities that sort of failed to stop George Dimitriou when they could have possibly done so besides those, we've discussed?
Well, she's been to the police. She has pleaded with the bankruptcy courts saying that I was a victim in all this. And it's just like no one has believed her. No one has listened to her. And, to find yourself bankrupt after,
oh my God.
And I have to clarify too that in some of these situations, these people were already in financial distress and George Dimitriou just made it worse. So whether their financial position was going to lead to the eventual outcome, I don't know. But whatever happened, Dimitriou just made things so much worse for people.
So you mentioned just then that, Lepasana, she told so many people about what was happening to her. No one believed her. Why?
Because I just think that fraudsters get away with it because people don't believe that they will do it. They don't believe that lawyers will help them do it. And there's one lawyer, Hector X, and I've been writing about Hector X for years. He's been found, guilty of professional misconduct.
Yep.
So he was acting for some of the victims. And then it turns out that when George Dimitriou declares himself bankrupt and transfers his assets to another former bankrupt, who is helping him backdate the documents but Hector X, who's meant to be representing his own clients, but instead he's doing the dirty with George Dimitriou. And he actually died in September last year, but there are multiple claims for professional negligence against Hector X. And this is another failure by the regulators. The Law Society actually took over his practice in 2020. He had to hand in his practicing certificate again. So the Leishmans, who were victims of Hector X, they've been pestering the Law Society to release their files so that they can at least try to recover some of their funds under, this professional sort of negligence cover for victims of lawyers.
Because they say not only have they lost their house in Newcastle, but also $4 million, right?
Yes, but they can't get their files back because the Law Society has them. And at the last I heard, they were saying, now it'll cost you $600 if you want to get them from this office, or if we bring them into the city, that'll cost, $800. And you think these people have suffered enough, and now you're charging them to get their own files from your office. Like, it's just, I just think the wheels of justice in this case
have ground these people under the wheel.
Yeah, not only have they turned slowly, they've ground them into oblivion.
And I guess just to wrap up, I guess this would seem to be the indignity to top it all off is that the allegation in your piece is that this Sydney solicitor, the late Sydney solicitor Hector X, that he allegedly helped George Dimitriou to retain his Lamborghini, his Maserati, millions of dollars that he's stolen from clients by sort of, I guess, hiding them away. Is that right? Before he declared himself bankrupt.
Yes, that's right. That's the last
horrible.
insult is, and in fact, I think he said he had $3 in his accounts.
That's right.
But it's interesting because his current bankruptcy trustee has now extended his bankruptcy, because normally you are bankrupt for 3 years, but the bankruptcy trustee has found all these anomalies, hiding assets, etc. So his bankruptcy has been extended for an extra 4 years.
Till 2027.
Till 2027.
Yeah, but does that mean that he's still got millions of dollars allegedly stashed away somewhere, and is it Lamborghini and his Maserati?
Well, I think that is what is believed. But again, a bankruptcy trustee needs to be funded in order to, pursue this, because doing forensic accounting, doing that kind of tracing is not cheap. So you need for someone to come along and say, I will give you X amount of money to go after this man. His poor victims, they often don't have the money to fund this. So it's a vicious circle. Like, you can get away with stuff if your victims are crushed, are financially crushed. It's, it's win-win for you as the crook.
So what should happen next? Is anyone actually going to, do you think, take notice of this story and actually pick up on it?
I don't know. Yes, it'll be interesting to see what does happen.
Okay, well, watch this space, listeners and viewers. Thanks so much, Kate, as always, for your time.
Oh, my pleasure.